All right, welcome to Bet the Edge. I'm Jay Croucher here with Drew Dinsick, recording Tuesday afternoon. We'll finish up talking about Week 13 in the NFL, talk Steelers-Bengals, 49ers-Bills, our best bets for the week. And then we'll also talk about what I think is a very funky Defensive Player of the Year market in the NFL. But let's start off with Steelers-Bengals, which features the DPOY frontrunner, TJ Watt. The Bengals are 3-point favorites. The total is 47. It's been bouncing around between 2.5 and 3. It moved towards the Bengals at open. Drew, do you agree with the move towards Cincinnati?
I agree. And it mostly has to do with huge questions that I have about what's going on right now with the Steelers defense. If you kind of track the evolution of units throughout the season, which I do, something stands out very painfully obvious when you look at the Steelers defense, and that is that their run defense is completely falling apart. That's surprising. This is a unit that you used to be able to kind of count on as a top 5, run stuffers, and that, most of the success on a given week came from, well, how many chaotic plays will they have and where will they happen on the field and how chaotic will they be? But this is now a very different type of Steelers defense where they're they to me at least, they look well schemed, they look coached up, but they are definitely beatable. And the Bengals are coming off of extra rest here. Obviously, their bye week last week came at a decent time to get this offense healthy, and I think the kind of right mix of running and pass balance here should help this Bengals team look pretty amazing offensively. If you only said I can make one bet on this game, it would be specifically isolating the Bengals and their team total over. I think Burrow is going to potentially have one of his better days ever playing against this Steelers unit, as we've seen a lot of teams figure out ways to kind of mitigate the pass rush here. And while there's extra time here for Pittsburgh as well, and Pittsburgh certainly has some very easy homework in terms of how do you attack the Cincinnati defense. I think that unless Pittsburgh can create a couple of key turnovers, get a couple of red zone stops, fourth down stops, I think that the Pittsburgh offense is going to need to find their way to 30 points to get a win. So Bengals, to me here, should be the beneficiaries of a pretty awesome day of football.
Okay, what do you think of the Steelers' offense at the moment in terms of their ability to exploit what has been one of the worst defenses in the NFL?
It's interesting to try to figure out exactly if what they're doing is sustainable for exactly as long as we've seen it be successful, or if the cracks and the issues and the kind of the low-hanging fruit in terms of how to stop them is now pretty clearly exposed. I will say that I was surprised in the aftermath of the loss to the Browns. People were very, very hard on Russell Wilson in terms of the coverage. I was taken aback by that, because every time he had the ball in his hands and he tried the deep pass down the left sideline, 20 to 30 yards down the field, it felt like that play was there. That play will be there against the Bengals. And if they can pass protect, and if they can keep Trey Hendrickson out of the backfield, and if Russell Wilson, tries to continue to push that button, I would expect it to work. And there is a pretty straightforward way to defend Russell Wilson that I think has been tried and true now for years, and for whatever reason defenses have not really been exercising this year, and at some point that will change. Lou Anarumo is a good enough defensive mind that he might be the guy that does it, and what I mean by that is that Russell Wilson will not look at short or intermediate over the middle of the field, period. He will not see guys that are running wide open over that portion of the field, either because he can't see it because of his height, or because he just is not tuned into even looking for those plays. And so I think if you kind of vacate that space and you dedicate your safeties to playing a little bit deeper, and to really try to kind of mitigate the moon ball, particularly along the left sideline, left hash, like, you should be able to keep this explosive pass offense in check. And then if this all of a sudden becomes only about the ability for the Steelers to run, Maybe they can sustain drives. Maybe they can move the ball between the 20s. They'll get some field goal attempts out of that, obviously. But the red zone offense for the Steelers is a disaster. It seems like they can only score touchdowns when it's explosive plays that are outside of the 20. And I think, all of this, I think, marinates into a nice stew that suggests that the Bengals can not only win, but cover a 3 here.
I agree. And we'll touch on that game a little bit again later on. But for now, before we get to Defensive Player of the Year, spend your Black Friday with the Big Ten on NBC and Peacock. Our triple header starts with a serving of men's basketball at 2:30 p.m. Eastern, followed by women's volleyball at 4:30. The day wraps up with Iowa football hosting Nebraska in prime time. All right, Defensive Player of the Year market in the NFL. I think this is the wonkiest one of all the awards at the moment. TJ Watt, he ranges from a -125 to -200 favorite in the market. Myles Garrett is 10-1. Again, that ranges out to around 14-1. Then you have Will Anderson, Xavier McKinney, Chris Jones, who people still talk about for Defensive Player of the Year, even though he plays on a meh defense and has 3 sacks in 11 games. Danielle Hunter is 17-1. Trey Hendrickson, Pat Surtain are your next two. Do you think there is a best bet to be made in this market at the moment?
I'm struggling because my intuition says anyone but TJ. I just don't know who anyone is. And I think the fact of the matter for Defensive Player of the Year still remains the pedigree you carry into a season is the number one factor for inclusion and consideration. And you have to already be acknowledged as one of, if not the best defensive player in football to be on the short list to win this award. That hurts Xavier McKinney. That hurts Will Anderson to a degree. It hurts Danielle Hunter. It very much hurts Trey Hendrickson, right? I don't know that there is going to be an acknowledgement and a, wow, boy, did we miss it. Somehow we just didn't realize that Trey Hendrickson was one of the best players in football before the season started. Like, if he wins the sack title, he'll get some 4th place votes, some 5th place votes. I don't think realistically he's going to get anywhere close to enough 1st place votes, particularly on one of the worst defenses in football. So, I think ultimately it's going to be tough to take down Watt, and it's going to have to be someone who has the pedigree to do it. But he looks extremely weak right now if you try to make a case from a neutral with the statistics that he's compiled.
Yeah. So right now, TJ Watt, I think there's this presumption that Watt is just the incumbent who's just going to stroll to the award. Like, TJ Watt has 29 pressures in 11 games. He is 58th in the NFL in pressures. He's 11th in sacks, 7.5 in 11 games. His team is good. They've been good. They have a solid defense, but not a top 5 defense. And they're like 65% or so to lose their division. So I think the idea that Watt is this kind of invulnerable favorite is just completely wrong. And then when you stack up his numbers against Myles Garrett specifically, Garrett has 52 pressures to Watt's 29. Garrett has 10 sacks to Watt's 7.5. Garrett has the superior pass rush win rates. Garrett also, I think this is very important, Garrett absolutely embarrassed TJ Watt in prime time to the point where NFL Network are doing segments the next morning being like, TJ Watt can't win Defensive Player of the Year anymore, which is reactionary. And if TJ has 2 sacks of Joe Burrow, then all of a sudden all the vibes come back and he's Defensive Player of the Year again. But just goes to show that his case is fairly fragile for a guy who's minus money in the market everywhere. Yeah. And I think it was, I kind of usually don't read too much into this stuff, but I do think it was very material. Myles Garrett's soundbite after the game that everyone saw, where Garrett said after he had 3 sacks and a forced fumble and Watt was on a milk carton for the game, that Garrett said, "I am Edge One. I am the Defensive Player of the Year, not TJ Watt. This all runs through me." And everyone kind of nodded their head, being like, yeah, Myles Garrett is still the guy. And I get that the reason that Garrett is, 5 to 7x Watt's price everywhere is that Garrett's team is 3-8 and the defense isn't amazing. But I just think that can be overcome because of Garrett's pedigree, because everyone accepts that Garrett is like one of the 5-7 best defensive players of the past 15 years. Like Garrett is a generational defensive player. And I think that because of the head-to-head with Watt and everything that came out of that, because of the pedigree, because Watt's season just isn't that great statistically, and the team, if they lose the division, will be fine, a good story, but I don't think it'll be a great one if they slip and lose the division from here after being in control of it after the Baltimore win. I just don't think that people are going to be like, yeah, I'm voting TJ Watt Defensive Player of the Year over Myles Garrett. I understand that he was worse in every stat, but he didn't have Deshaun Watson as his quarterback, so he gets to win Defensive Player of the Year. Like, I just don't think that is very persuasive. And we can talk about how perhaps all these other kind of this morass of edge rushers might open the door for a non-edge rusher to win. But what do you think specifically of Garrett against Watt?
Well, I think your commentary was exactly what I needed to hear to go bet Garrett, because I honestly, to me, it is a very simple exercise. You look at pressures, you look at sacks, you look at schedule, and if there is a blue chip defensive player at the top of the board or near the top of the board, that's who it's going to be. And right now, that's Garrett, and he is standing alone among the blue chip guys. And the idea of an outsider coming from the clouds, it's just, maybe it happens. I've never seen it. And I will be blown away if this is the year that it does happen. The examples you can point to of outsiders in the last 20 years were on generational defenses and had clear and obvious, yes, that not only was that clearly the best defensive player of the season, but it was on a defense that I will remember off the top of my head as being amazing. And that does not exist this year.
Yeah. I think the other thing too is like this is an award for Hall of Famers. Those are the guys who win. Right. I don't know if he's an exception. I haven't studied his career closely enough, but Stephon Gilmore probably, he doesn't have the same pedigree as Aaron Donald or JJ Watt or TJ Watt or Myles Garrett or whatever. But Stephon Gilmore was on by far the number one defense in the NFL, had 6 picks from memory, think a run back for a touchdown. And also he was regarded as the best cornerback in the NFL that year. He had that level of pedigree. And so the idea that like Kirby Joseph, is Kirby Joseph going to win Defensive Player? It just doesn't. I think with the safeties, the issue is that if there was just one of them, then there would be a chance. But the fact that McKinney, Joseph, and Branch are all kind of overlapping with their stats and they all have similar degrees of pedigree, and neither they're not on top 5 defenses. So I don't really see it with those guys unless they go crazy interception wise the rest of the way. The Houston guys, I think it just hurts that they're on the same team, Hunter and Anderson, and also that defense isn't dominant. That team is kind of scuffling. Yeah, if one of them completely runs away with the sack title, maybe. Trey Hendrickson again, it's just hard for a guy who doesn't have DPOY pedigree on a defense that is a bottom 5 defense in the league, where even if he were to win the sack title by 3 sacks, I just don't really see it there. Dexter Lawrence, I liked Dexter for a while, but the team is now just so much of a mess that it's going to be really uphill for him to win. Fred Warner and Nick Bosa, the Niners are just collapsing. If Bosa comes back this week, that becomes somewhat interesting because, this award is about high-end outcomes and ceiling cases and the ability to actually beat TJ Watt and Myles Garrett. And if Nick Bosa comes back and is a monster and helps lead the Niners to the division, which is unlikely but still well within the range of possibilities, that is the type of high-end outcome that I prefer over Kirby Joseph winning Defensive Player of the Year. One name that I wanted to throw at you, what do you think would need to happen for Patrick Surtain to win Defensive Player of the Year?
Yeah, I mean, the Broncos, for whatever it's worth, are flying pretty far under the radar as far as a standout defense. And when they do get talked about nationally, it's largely the surprise of how much better their pass rush is than people expected. And it's just kind of hand waved. Oh, yes. And of course, they have Patrick Surtain, who's just wiping out wide receiver 1 by every week, as opposed to that's the reason why. So there's going to have to be a paradigm shift that makes people kind of really come back to, well, wait a second. This is a generationally good defense. And it is. Well, look at these numbers for Surtain. And I think the fact that we're already in late November and we haven't already felt the tide turn there is a problem. The only place that I've felt the tide turning in terms of the national discourse has been on Brian Branch. And honestly, like, I have reluctantly upgraded the Detroit defense to being a top 10 unit. And I still don't understand how they're doing it. And if this carries through the end of the season and they finish top 5 in EPA per play, top 5 in DVOA, if they are numerically sound at the end of the season, then maybe there is a way in. But he's going to need some more big plays and some big games, I think, to really put himself in the discussion. But no, in general, as you look at the board right now and you kind of square pressures, sacks, just overall performance and impact with the names that are at or near the top, it looks pretty obvious that Myles Garrett should at a minimum be a stone's throw price wise from TJ Watt, if not equal, let alone this disparity we're seeing, which is, to me at least, incalculable.
Yep. No, I agree. And people have privately, when I've told them about this, have kind of laughed at the idea that Watt and Garrett should be almost identical prices. But I think there's just anchoring in a kind of deference to a very illiquid market. But I don't see why these guys. I think that Watt is slightly more likely than Garrett to win because he can reach higher end outcomes because his team isn't 3-8 and that they can win the division. And if he just plays Garrett to a draw the rest of the way, then I think Watt would be the favorite. And if he has a few moments, because the moments are going to be louder because they matter in the context of playoff races, etc. But I think like Garrett is lapping him statistically at the moment. And I think that Garrett they project very similarly the rest of the way. And if Garrett just slightly edges him out the rest of the way, I think that he would beat him head to head. So I agree. I think that Garrett should be more in the 4-1 type of range. Watt in the 3-1 type of range, and you make them both a little bit short. I wouldn't have an issue with that. The funny part is like, who's the third most likely guy to win? Like, it might be Surtain, might be Branch, might be Bosa because his high end outcomes, might be McKinney if you think that he can just go berserk with continued interceptions. But I just think there's like 10 guys who are all 2 to 3% equity in this market, and they're all lagging a fair way behind Watt and Garrett. Yeah. But I think that Garrett is the best bet by margin at the moment. And also, like, one thing, and this is maybe just the construction of my own mind as I think about this market too much, but one thing that the Garrett soundbite presented to me that might become a thing is this idea that, like, Garrett is the best defensive player. He's the best guy. He won the award last year. He came into the season with the crown, and no one has really done enough to take it away from him. It's like, no, that's not how it works. But there is this idea in my head that, like, if Garrett maintains the statistical edge over Watt and there's no other inspiring case, then Garrett kind of is the default guy in a way.
Yeah. You know what that description reminds me of, Jay? Award number 2 for JJ Watt. Award number 3 for JJ Watt. Award number 2 for Aaron Donald. Award number 3 for Aaron Donald. Like, these guys were clearly entrenched as the best players, and nobody did enough to take him out that year. And right now, at least, no one has done enough to take out Garrett. So that's a plausible rubric, and sort of 2012 to today, I think, would support this kind of concept of, and I think that's what we're kind of just getting at. Like, you need pedigree.
Yeah. Yep. I think it's going to help too if Garrett had 14 sacks last year when he won it. He's a very good chance to go past that because he's got 10. He's playing in prime time against the Broncos this week, and then he gets TJ Watt again. If he outperforms TJ again, then it's going to get, I think, pretty uphill for Mr. Watt. But we'll see. I still think TJ is the most likely to win, but I think it's a lot closer than the market implies. All right, it is a second helping of Sunday Night Football this week. Drew, finish your Thanksgiving holiday by watching the Dolphins take on Jordan Love and the Packers at Lambeau Field at 8 p.m. Eastern. Then wrap up your weekend with Brock Purdy and the 49ers against Josh Allen and the Bills in Buffalo. Both matchups can be seen on NBC and Peacock. All right.
As you all know by now, we've teamed up with BetMGM this season. We'll be using BetMGM lines to make all our picks, and we'll have special offers for our listeners each week. If you haven't signed up to BetMGM yet, use bonus code BETEDGE and you'll get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using bonus code BETEDGE. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game, and you'll receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your first bet loses. Just make sure you use bonus code BETEDGE when you sign up. See BetMGM.com for terms. 21 plus only. U.S. promotional offers not available in New York, Nevada, Ontario, or Puerto Rico. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Available in the U.S. Call 8778-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467369 in New York. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP in Arizona, 1-800-327-5050 in Massachusetts, 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa, 1-800-981-0023 in Puerto Rico. First bet offer for new customers only, subject to eligibility requirements. Rewards are non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire in 7 days in partnership with Kansas Crossing Casino and Hotel. Don't forget, if you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code BETEDGE and get your $1,500 first bet offer today.
Okay, Bills 7-point favorites home to the 49ers. The total is 45, Sunday night game. It's a little bit difficult to talk about because we don't know the status of Brock Purdy, among other injured Niners as well. It's funny, Drew. I just searched Brock Purdy on Twitter to get the latest update, and the first thing that pops up is David Lombardi tweeting Brock Purdy's value should be clearer than ever, which keep on riding the horse, Lombo. I love it. Loved your work last year.
A little too late.
Just couldn't quite get the MVP home, but alas. How do you handicap this game with all the moving parts at the moment around San Francisco?
It's so freaking hard, man. The Niners as an organization are not especially transparent when it comes to injury news. I'm not saying that they're just flat out liars, but they certainly don't, just kind of telegraph what's happening very clearly, which means that you end up a lot of times with some guesswork. And sometimes that means you make a bet on Niners plus 2.5, and then it closes plus 6.5. I don't get the sense that this number is exactly in line with my probability for Purdy playing. I would put him in like the 40% range, and this to me is more like 10 or 20%. And in fact, it may be just people are kind of throwing their hands up and saying Purdy or not, the Niners are just a lost cause. I mean, 7 is humongous here as far as a price point, and I know that there are, again, like everyone who matters for the Niners is hurt except Fred Warner. Nick Bosa, still huge question marks about his availability. If, again, I'm flipping a coin here, but I'm going to put his probability at closer to 60%. I think the Trent Williams probability is closer to 80%. And I think Christian McCaffrey is going to 100% play, but his effectiveness is more at like 70%. A lot of these numbers, I would say I have extremely low confidence in, which means as I come together with a, kind of a full distribution of how this game could play out, there's plenty of outcomes here where Bills, as a 7-point favorite, makes sense in terms of availability. And there's plenty of ways that this game plays out where the Bills can cover a 7-point spread, and I wouldn't be shocked. But the median for me is at 4.5 here, and I am going to have a long, hard thought about playing the Niners this week. As there is certainly a the leaders in the locker room didn't have the same sort of, well, our season is over type of attitude as everyone else who watched the game against the Packers, right? And so they maybe didn't, they maybe have a little more of a long arc thought here. They're certainly not out of the division, albeit my chances for them to make the playoffs are getting a very, very small. They don't necessarily seem like a team that has kind of completely given up here. And I think that if this is all systems go, oh, surprise, everybody's ready. And we did throw away the game last week because we knew we were going to get guys more hurt. So we just elected not to play them. Like, I also won't be surprised. So, I think this is the Niners' last stand. I think the Bills are gettable. I know the Bills are coming off extra rest and they're going to be pretty much fully healthy here. I think the Niners' defense is certainly certainly beatable, even if Nick Bosa plays. So I think I'm going to probably wrestle with the total more than I'm going to wrestle with Niners here, because if we ultimately have a healthy Brock Purdy under center for the Niners, and if Trent Williams is out there, then 45 should look more like 49. And I think the over is probably the sharper angle.
Yep, I think that makes sense. But going back to what you're saying about the Niners and their truthfulness or not, the latest report we had was, as we're recording on Tuesday, was that Shanahan said that Brock Purdy resumed throwing without issue. So based on Kyle Shanahan's track record of telling the truth on these things, Brock Purdy may never play football again. He may actually be dead. Brock Purdy may not be with the living anymore.
He's currently getting consulted for shoulder surgery.
Yes, exactly. It's all over for Brock. We'll see him in 2030.
Comeback player of the year campaign starts now.
Yes, indeed. It is there's so many moving parts with this game that it's very difficult to assess. But I will say, someone who doesn't have any Josh Allen in the MVP market, you burned me on Christmas last year, Brock. Just come back. Let's get rid of Allen's MVP. Even if you can't win it yourself, let's just knock him out and let someone else win it. Whether it's Mr. Jackson, Mr. Mahomes, or Mr. Barkley. Just not Mr. Allen, please. But yeah, I mean, it just all hinges on that, because the Brandon Allen show is no one is buying tickets to that after what he served up in Green Bay. All right, let's jump to our favorite bets for week 13. Drew, what do you got?
Just real quick on the Niners against the Packers. I stupidly rewatched that game. Don't ask me why. When I saw the Debo running back the kickoff in the second half, and I was like, in the moment, I was like, hey, they're not out of this. I know the outcome of the game, but that penalty on that kick return, that took the last little bit of wind out of the sails of the Niners. But gosh, that was a tough rewatch. Hopefully, a more enjoyable watch for me is going to be Chargers-Falcons. And that is because I think the Falcons should be small favorites here. And this, honestly, is one of sort of the spots of the year in terms of rest, in terms of travel, in terms of situation. And that means, by all of those factors, I mean, the bye coming at the right time for the Falcons to get their defense healthy, to get their defense schematically fixed. The Chargers coming off of a short week and 2 consecutive games where they played in prime time now have to get ready for a 10 o'clock a.m. body clock start time on Sunday morning. Like, this is as well set up for the for the Falcons to generate a lead, get out to a good start in this game, and really put the Chargers on their heels. And if I've learned anything about the Chargers from watching them a lot over the last month, it is that they are not a team that I would trust at all to be able to come back from a meaningful deficit, even against a defense that has as many issues as the Falcons. So I think this is perfectly set up on a platter for the Falcons to get a statement win. People have started to very sincerely doubt whether they can hold on to a very weak NFC South. I think they put together the type of performance we saw a couple of weeks ago against the Cowboys and remind everybody that they are very much headed for playoffs. And Falcons best bet for me on Sunday.
Okay, I like it. I'm taking the Bengals -2.5 against the Steelers. We've broken this one down, but I think that a couple of things. One, I don't think the Steelers offense is particularly strong and will eviscerate the Bengals defense, as the Bengals defense has been prone to evisceration in the past. I think that they can put up enough of a fight there. And I just think too that the Steelers corners are very suspect going up against Chase and Higgins, and then more of just the vibes-based assessment. I just don't think this Bengals team is just going to roll over and let the season completely wash away. They're 4-7, but it's still achievable that they can get the last wild card in the AFC. I think that after what happened last year with Joe Burrow's playing at an MVP level now, even though he won't factor into the award because of the team record. But I think that between the quarterback mismatch here and some frailties in the Pittsburgh defense at corner, I think the Bengals have enough to cover and win by a field goal or more. All right, we are done for today. Don't forget to check out NBCSports.com for more information to help you with your wagers. Thanks to those watching on the NBC Sports YouTube channel. If you're listening to us in podcast form, don't forget to rate and subscribe. Also, a reminder to find all your favorite NBC Sports shows on Amazon Music. Just head to amazon.com/NBC Sports. From myself and Drew, we'll see you soon.